Ace. Stop. What are we listening to?
I'm not sure. It's public domain music though. Somebody it's a riff on their, yeah.
Okay.
I like it though.
I do too.
I'm not sure. Are other people supposed to be, do I have to publicly let them in? I don't think I do, right?
If you do, it will appear up on the top.
And the participants, right?
That says somebody is waiting and you admit them.
Okay.
But what I had to do was log in using the ID and password.
Okay.
So and that was in the email. So Zoom has changed some of their stuff. It can be a little confusing. We probably want to wait, a couple of minutes after 10 to do it, because it takes, for some folks, it's really frustrating to re-sign into Zoom, find the ID, find the password.
Yeah, that's me every time. I have to find a Zoom link all the time this is from like a year ago. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, Krista, it clearly will be more than just you and me.
Hooray!
We've got Kit. Thank you for joining us, Kit. Someone else here. CPE Communications. Kit, if you don't mind my asking, what is Kit short for, or is it short for anything?
Short for Catherine. But I've always gone by Kit. My parents call me Kit.
Oh, that's cool.
Hi, guys. Thank you for joining us today. It's a little bit of a small crowd at this point, so I think we're going to give it a couple more minutes. But I am Krista Ferguson. I am with the Membership Outreach Committee of the Michigan chapter of NATAS. And today we are holding the first of our 6 webinars of the year. And we have Kevin Dietz here, and he is going to talk about how to deal with everything after 2 years of crises and pressure. And now we're all getting back into the newsroom and basically the great reimagination of what we do. So take it away.
All right, thank you, Krista. It's a small group. Kit, Carlotta, I would invite you to go ahead and open up your mics if you want to, and we can have a bit of a conversation as opposed to all presentation. I'll certainly do a presentation with you, and you guys should feel as though this is a personal thing for you. And let's talk about the differences. Kit, I'm going to ask you a question first, and that is, and Carlotta, what do you guys do? What do you do in the newsroom?
So I will stay muted because I am in an active newsroom and the weather setter's right over there. But I'm an executive producer at Fox 17.
At Fox 17, and where is Fox 17?
Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids, great, excellent. So you're right next to the weather people there.
Yeah, we are.
Carlotta, what do you do?
I am somewhat semi-retired and working with my own little private little company, CPE Communications. I'm the Michigan chapter trustee. So I get around to all the stations as a representative for Michigan to the national board. Right now, I am formerly the production manager at PBS Detroit. I was there for 36 years. And now I work with the Tuskegee Airmen. I am the corresponding secretary for the Tuskegee Airmen Detroit chapter. I'm with the Friends of Detroit City Airport. I'm one of the advisors for the Detroit School of the Arts, which is the broadcast school here in the public school area.
You're busy, Carlotta. That's fantastic. One of my best friends here in Austin actually sits on the Tuskegee Alumni Association. I think he's president of the Alumni Association at the university there. So I have a great affinity for what's happening over there, and he keeps me very much in touch. I played in a couple of golf tournaments for them. Robin, we're just going through, since it's a small group. Robin, what do you do for a living?
Hi, sorry, I'm a tad late, you guys. Just coming off of another meeting.
We just started.
No worries. I am the executive producer at Jack Morton Agency here in Detroit. It is an agency that primarily does GM's experiential content, but also has, other clients here, Highland, I don't know, a few other clients. So I produce a lot of video content for the agency.
Okay, fantastic. Matt, how are you?
Good to see you, Kevin.
Good to see you too, man. It's great to have you logging in.
Good to see you.
Remind me where you are.
We're still in Kalamazoo at WMT, news director here. Trying to rally a few of our folks together to jump on today as well. I just wanted to kind of listen, but good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I'm going to invite you guys, since we have a small group, and Matt, even if you rally some of your folks in there, it's absolutely fine. It's a small enough group that if you have questions or anything, just interrupt me, just pop your mic on and feel free to ask or add. One of the things that I have learned in talking about this issue, which is really reimagining what we do, is that everybody's got great ideas. There is no single source of a really good idea about how the newsroom and newsroom function, newsroom systems, the news we produce, the content we produce, how that has changed in good ways for our audiences. And so the more we share, the better that it will be. Dustin, welcome. Good to have you with us. I'm going to share my screen here real quickly, and I will still be able to see you, I know that, and want to invite everybody to play along with me as we go. So I call this reimagination. There is no question any of you guys, I'm sure, will agree that how we produce the content that we produce right now has certainly changed. But it's more than just the function and technology that has changed. It's also where our heads are at in the newsroom, because we have changed fundamentally. And as much as we have changed, so have our viewers. Their approach to the news, their approach to the connections that they have with our newsrooms and our stations have changed dramatically. And let's remember one thing that has become overarching important. The first is that we are still, as local news providers, the most trusted information providers in our communities. The most trusted information providers in our communities. And we have to take that trust and honor it as sacred. We also have to remember that our viewers are relying on us to give them the information they need to live their lives more than ever before, more than ever before. At the same time, our jobs have never really been easy, have they? I mean, this is Hunter S. Thompson, which I love. Journalists are overworked, underpaid, grumpy wretches who have undertaken vows of misery and poverty in pursuit of a higher calling. I think for many in your newsrooms, maybe for you, there's just this little sliver of truth in all of this, right? These are challenging places to work, and there's challenging work that we have done. Zig Ziglar gave us this information, this definition of fear, that fear can be a forget everything and run. And I would suggest that you, maybe, but I can tell you for sure about half of the people in your newsrooms or in your organizations are thinking right now about running. They're thinking about whether or not to leave your organization because perhaps they want the support systems that family or friends bring them wherever they grew up, or perhaps they don't have those support systems and they want to find a place that does. Or maybe they're looking at this career and deciding whether or not this is the career that they want to stay into. I am sure that some of you right now can think of yourselves or others that you're working with in that same way. Gallup did a poll, and in the Gallup poll, they found that over 50% of people in the United States right now are thinking about changing their jobs or careers. Some are closer than others, but this is going to be something we have to address. I'm going to try to give you a few ideas about how to address it for yourself and how to address it perhaps for your staff by talking broadly about what we do. Zig Ziglar also said there's another way of looking at fear. We can face everything and rise. We can decide that this job is too important. The work we do is too important to not do it. Someone must, if we are going to survive the health of our organizations, the health of our communities, democracy itself, maybe in some ways hinging on how we cover the issues, the big issues of the day. I would hope that some of you will think hard about facing what's happening here, facing that fear, and getting better, continuing to improve and deliver for the communities that we serve. I'm going to start first by talking about something that I know you guys talk a lot about between yourselves, particularly managers that we have here. It's culture, the culture of our newsrooms, the culture of the places that we work is the thing that is going to have a lot of people we work with deciding whether or not to stay. And it will be the thing that helps us understand how to best serve our communities based upon how the culture of our organization attacks the issues of our communities. So what is culture? Culture is the social order of the places where we work. In other words, it's the way we do things around here. I bring this up not because I'm going to do a deep dive into newsroom culture. I'm going to talk a little bit more broadly than that. But I say this to say, a lot has changed in the last 2 years, and that has affected the culture of the organizations that we work in, and the way we do things around here maybe needs to change. And maybe now is the right time for us to be thinking about how we can change the things that we do. Maybe we can shake things up a bit. Now, certainly shaking things up a bit depends on your perspective. So I show you this as kind of a joke, but it really depends on the perspective that you have when you're looking at your own newsroom organization or the organizations that you work in, depending on whether you're at the top or whether you're at the bottom looking up. We need to think about our own perspectives as we look at our newsrooms. So what makes up culture? Well, here's some things that I would suggest we should be thinking about as we go about our work, whether we are leaders and managers or journalists, or as some of you are, working in other organizations. 4 things that I think we should be keeping in mind. The first is we should be engaging. Engaging ourselves, meaning we should be part of the decision-making that is happening in our organizations. We need to actively take part. Now, as managers, as leaders, we need to be encouraging our team and our staff to do that, right? And as staff, as producers, as reporters, we need to insert ourselves into the daily discussion in our organizations, in our newsrooms, and in our communities. That we need to be understanding what's happening in those communities in order to cover them better. I'm going to change my speaker. Hold on, give me 1 second. Here we go. The second is that we have to start to listen. Now, we can talk about listening as it applies in our own organizations. A lot of us, particularly as managers, do a lot of talking, we do a lot of decision making, and I would suggest that we need to listen more. But by this, I mean listen to the people that we serve. That we should be finding out how the people we serve are thinking about what's happening in their world. We may not be spending as much time in communities as we used to because of pandemic. Or we may be just now getting back into communities that we haven't seen in quite some time. We need to listen to what our viewers need in order to serve them well. We also have to listen to one another, our friends and our colleagues. Listen to them and their own health, their mental health. We need to show care. And you sometimes can show care just by listening, right? We should be stretching ourselves right now. We should be growing and developing the work that we do, helping each other to get better, pushing each other, pushing our own goals, our own objectives, pushing ourselves to be better. That means doing what you're doing right now, right? Listening to some third party like me talk about what we can be trying to do and trying to figure out how you can apply that to your work. It can also be coaching each other. Number 4 here, coaching each other to get better, being good helpers, good buddies with the people around us, critiquing each other's work, and coaching each other in order to keep getting better. I know that Krista and NATAS, they're recording this. One way you might be able to help is to suggest to those who you're sitting next to or colleagues that you have that they might tune into this recording at some point during this week just to see if they help. Well, that is if you think it's any good. So listen, let's talk a little bit about what else we can do. Is this making sense to you? I don't see many faces. I see you, Kit. If you guys don't mind turning on your cameras, it really is easier for me to talk to human beings than it is to black boxes. And so that would be great. But is this stuff making sense to you? How many of you right now are, Matt, are all of your folks back in the newsroom now?
Yes.
Oh,
that's great. Good. Kit, what about you?
Yeah, for the most part. We're a little more flexible on needs to work from home circumstances, but yeah, everyone's here.
I think everybody's trying to be a little more flexible now, right? In fact, it's probably required if you want to hang on to some employees that they need that. And hey, we have developed the technology that allows us to do it. There is something to be said for everyone gathering in one place and being able to have good conversations together, though, isn't there? For sure. So we engage, we listen, we want to stretch ourselves. And that means as managers, those of you, EPs, news directors, think about how you can help your staff stretch themselves beyond where they are, take on something a little new. And we want to develop a coaching culture in our newsrooms, the kind of coaching culture that helps everyone get better. Culture depends on two things, and these are things that you should be thinking about, but it's only two things to think about. The culture of our newsrooms depends on how people interact with one another and how people react to change. And you can probably think now about how people in your newsroom interact. Do you have that kind of newsroom that's a family, right? Everybody gets together, they all love each other, we care for each other, we have each other's backs, we do that? Or do we have a newsroom in which people really work very independently? And this could have changed during pandemic because we had to work independently, didn't we? If we were at home, we had to figure it out. And then how do we react to change? You've just brought, many of you have just brought, Matt, you just brought all your folks back in the last few months. What has changed about that? My guess is that whether or not you feel it, your staff feels something's different, right? Something's a little different because we've been gone for so long. So yeah, returning to the newsroom changes the way that we interact with each other and interact and react to change. I want to point this out to you in order to help you kind of more visually understand what has happened. One of the things that I do with newsrooms, and over the past couple of years have done more of it, is I look at newsroom culture and we actually try to assess newsroom culture, try to figure out what's driving the culture of a newsroom, what makes people feel like they're part of this organization and organization. So in the assessments that I do, there are surveys and then personal assessments, and I put all those things together. And this is what generally a very high-performing newsroom looks like. A high-performing newsroom cares about one another. It's a caring newsroom because you have to. The work's hard, right? You have to care for one another and support each other. In a high-performing newsroom, people do this really, really well. And it's a learning culture. High-performing newsrooms love to create and innovate, and they feel free to do that. One of the keys to this is being free to fail forward. And that failure is just another part of learning. So we take on new ideas, innovate, new ways of telling stories, new ways of covering issues, new ways maybe perhaps of working in our newsroom, but we thrive on that in high achieving newsrooms because we love that level of innovation and we're not afraid to fail. The third piece of this is purpose, that we work for a higher calling. We work with a higher purpose. Many of us probably entered journalism because we want to do good. We want to make the communities we serve better, more educated. Perhaps we want to provide a voice for the voiceless, marginalized communities that haven't had one before, or perhaps we're really working toward holding the powerful accountable, powerful corporate interests, politicians, government, law enforcement. Perhaps that's what drives, but we're driven by that higher calling. In the pandemic, something changed. Because over the last year in the assessments that I have done, this is what I have found in red. So the high achieving newsrooms pre-pandemic looked like that in the green. Newsrooms changed, and they changed in one very significant way. While caring was still at the top, as you can see, we still cared about you, but the care was different. It wasn't just about caring about each other from the standpoint of us doing our work well. It suddenly became caring for each other because we didn't want each other to be unhealthy, whether that is physical health or mental health. We needed to start caring for one another in a different way. The innovation was still a part of it. Innovation is still a part of it, but we significantly lost, if you look on the right, where purpose fell, we lost that sense of purpose. We lost that idea that we have a higher calling, Not because we decided it didn't matter anymore, although the polarization of the work that we do, the polarization of our viewers, the way that they interact with us became much more difficult to really feel like you're doing good, right? But also the pandemic and the separation that we had changed us from working from purpose to safety, which I would define as, I'm just trying to get through every day. I'm just trying to make it through the day. And that means I'm putting this story together, or I'm getting this interview, or I got to anchor the newscast at 6 o'clock. I'll get ready to do that, but I got other shit to do, right? I've got people to take care of. And so this idea of working for a higher calling started to get lost. It's still there in the back, but we lost it for safety. So when now we're going back in to the newsroom and into our organizations, we have to remember, as leaders or as newsroom colleagues, we have to remember that we have changed as people and that we need to get that purpose back. It's the reason so many of us did this job. And without it, it would be no surprise that we would start thinking about whether or not a different career is in our future. So let's think about purpose in a different way. Let's think about purpose as something that right now might be missing from the newsrooms. And it doesn't mean that we don't want to be safe. What it means is safety should be inherent in what we do, but purpose should be rising to the top for the calling that we have. All right, so how do we do this? Well, the first is to talk about it. We need to talk about how purpose affects the work that we do every single day. And to do that means we need to kind of understand that how our viewers have changed. I mean, the way we used to produce news, and the thing that our viewers were used to before this is breaking news, right? Recency. If it was happening during the newscast, it made it pretty much more important than if it was happening at some other time. The recency of the story was very important to us. The second was that we relied on storytelling. Storytelling, meaning we talk about this a lot probably in our newsrooms, the idea of we're storytellers, right? What is stories made up of? They're dramatic. They're driven by conflict. They're driven by characters. And so we leaned in on that. The idea of the reporting was being done by storytellers, and we drove that with characters and conflict. And that works for us. It certainly did. But I think there's more that viewers expect from us now, and surveys would suggest to us the research that's been done on how viewers look at the news has changed. That now, rather than recency, the idea of the breaking news and the timeliness, our audience is demanding relevance, that we be meaningful to them, that the stories we do be meaningful, affect their lives, change their lives, be actionable. I like to talk about the usable newscast, asking, what does my audience need from us and how can they use the information that I'm giving them right now? We should be focusing on what our viewer needs and be advocates for our viewers. Then started thinking of storytelling, and certainly we've used storytelling a lot inside as an insider kind of discussion. But we probably should be talking much more about reporting. We are reporters first, and our viewers expect us to give them more depth, to be more substantive, and to be complete. Viewers know that we are the people who can help them through their day. We can help them make decisions, but we won't be able to do that if we don't drive depth and substance their direction, and they are telling us they need that. In recent research going into trust in news organizations, the most trusted organizations are, number one, not surprising, accurate and factual, but number two, driven by depth and substance. Slightly longer stories and fewer stories that waste my time. It was also a very interesting survey that just came out a month or two ago. And it was the idea that, and they did research into the idea of storytelling. And I know we use that, of course, a lot, but viewers don't like it. In fact, in a piece of research that was done, they showed the same story to two sets of viewers. And in one story, they said the reporter sees themselves as a storyteller. They're a storyteller. And in the other, they called the person doing the story a reporter. The ones who heard the reporter, the person delivering the story as a storyteller, 67% of them thought of it as negative, because they thought storytellers just have fancy ways of making things up, dramatic, using conflict in order to make us think something. Reporters are reporting facts. So I would suggest that we might not want to think about storytelling as much as reporting, because viewers don't trust storytellers in a pretty wide way. And in a time of fake news, that might be a label that we don't want to talk about. The last is context and community. That certainly good stories, reporting stories, relies on conflicted characters. That's classic storytelling drama, right? In news reporting, we're reporting with context for a community. And that may mean that we have to get into that community more often than we have in the past. It means we have to work to get into places we haven't generally covered. And this has been really clear during pandemic, that there have been many places we just didn't go, many communities, many neighborhoods we didn't visit. The Black Lives Matter protest showed that a lot, that our coverage of those communities, we didn't have the understanding of why these communities were in such pain, what the challenges were in communities of color, in particularly low income communities, which also tend to be communities of color. And that now is the best time, as we're coming back, as we're getting back out, as we're coming back together, thinking about diving into those communities that we have not heard from in a long time. If we want to be a voice to the voiceless, we've got to go visit communities that have been ignored. And now is the time for us to do that and learn from people like that. If we're going to bring purpose back, we need to be visiting with the people that we serve. We need to be talking about how we in our newsrooms do good in our communities. We have a responsibility to respect the communities we cover. The values that we have, the ethical values that we hold up. Now is the time for us to continue leaning in and talking about those things. What values are important to us? Well, of course, seeking the truth, telling it as fully as we possibly can, minimizing harm, the harm that we could do to our communities, making sure that we're acting independently and talking about that. And of course, holding ourselves accountable to the greater journalism community that we are part of, but also most importantly, accountable to the communities and the people that we serve. Meaning that we will answer to them. We can help, we can make the communities we serve better places to live through the journalism that we produce. Let's talk about that a lot. Are we successfully reaching that higher calling that we want to hold ourselves up to do? So I want to open this up and hear from some of you guys. We've got enough here that we should be able to have a short conversation about this. Krista, you asked, what is a good example of a newsroom, how a newsroom is better covering the community now versus the start of pandemic? Well, let me give you a broad example of that. Well, a couple of examples. One is there are several stations, particularly script zone stations, who have made a huge commitment to what they call the rebound. I don't know if any of you work for a scripts station on here right now. Oh, you do, Kit. Is this something you guys are doing? The rebound? Can you describe it for people?
So the rebound was kind of winding down right when I started. I started last June. So it was kind of on the downswing, but it was really getting out into the community and talking with organizations and talking with people who are doing good things at the local level.
Yeah. Some stations even expanded it beyond that to say, what innovative things are people doing as they're getting their businesses back up to speed, as they are reforming their communities after being so long inside. And so they were getting out and finding stories in the community, as opposed to relying on the phone calls of releases or things that we get, going out and saying, let's learn about a community, let's learn about what makes them tick. Let's learn about what is happening in those communities, not just from a negative perspective, because we have no problem running into places when there's crime happening, but instead going out and learning what makes a neighborhood a neighborhood, what makes it valuable, and how has it changed over the past couple of years. One small example there, Krista, of how news organizations are doing it. Now, I want to ask you guys this question, and I really hope that you can tell me, we can share this with one another. The first is, are there things that you have found you stopped doing? What has your newsroom stopped doing over the past couple of years, or your organization, for those of you who aren't in newsrooms? Anybody? One of the things I would suggest to you, and please feel free to open up and talk and interrupt me if you want, but one of the things I would suggest is that we should be right now thinking about what is old that we don't need to be doing anymore. And we certainly know that we don't have to produce a newscast in the newsroom anymore. We don't have to be in a studio. We can do that from home. Doesn't mean we should keep doing it, but we have options now that we didn't have before. Perhaps there are systems inside of our newsroom that haven't been working, which would lead us down to, what should we start doing right now? What can we do better? Are there things that we haven't been doing that we should start doing? Hybrid work is one of those things, the most obvious part, right? We wouldn't have dreamed in the past of just saying, yeah, just work from home today. That wasn't even in our vocabularies 2 years ago. But there are other things that maybe we should start doing. Have we thought about beats? Have we thought about how beats might work for community coverage? Not necessarily beats about, school or government, or legislature, crime, but instead beats built around neighborhoods or communities or the biggest stories. You may have an issue with traffic that's starting to come back now. Maybe that becomes a beat for you. What are the biggest issues in your audience cares about? Maybe someone should be focusing on those things. And then what can we be doing better? One of the things that I've already mentioned to you about doing better is community coverage, but finding purpose in the work that we do. Maybe we should be looking for solutions to some of the problems. Solutions journalism has become a really important part. The rebound was a little bit about that. Solutions journalism is one way of going out, identifying problems, and not stopping the reporting there, but going on and saying, what other communities have solved these problems? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Are there ways that we can help the community do better?
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add something that I learned last year, which I thought would be a very interesting thing to start doing in the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, is source auditing, which is something that I don't think very many newsrooms have done yet, but is a very interesting thing because we all seem to go back to the same sources over and over and over again. And those sources typically aren't very diverse, and it doesn't give a voice to a lot of the people who are in the community. And so that's been something that's interested me, but I don't know if anybody has particularly launched this in a newsroom, but yeah. Intriguing nonetheless.
Well, again, I'm going to lean toward script stations here. One of the things that I started working with scripts with a couple of years ago involved exactly what you're talking about, Krista, and that is the idea of a newsroom audit. I don't know if anybody from Detroit, the Graham station in Detroit, also we did the same thing. And it's a newscast audit, much like you're talking about. The idea of looking at a newscast through a very specific lens. One of those lenses can be, how do we cover communities of color? And so if we see a person of color on our news, how is that person being, I would say, profiled? Is it a positive story about them? Is it a negative story about them? Is it a neutral story about them? How often do the experts, as you just said, how often are the experts and sources that we use, how often are they people of color? How do we, and when you look through that lens, you start to see things. One of the folks in one of the early audits that we did, we were having this kind of a conversation virtually, and one of the producers came on and said, I did the audit and I was looking for, people of color, marginalized communities, but I didn't see any women on our newscast. Besides our reporter and our anchor, there weren't any women. All the experts we talked to were men. All the interviews that we did were men. Now, that's not something that normally you would just look at a newscast watching. What are the things we usually see? Well, we misspelled that graphic, but mic was clipped, those kinds of things. We don't notice it until we turn on the lens. Other audits you could do. Geography. What neighborhoods have we been in? What neighborhoods show up in our newscast? What regions? How often do we get out into the rural areas and tell stories? You could do those kinds of audits. So I think it's a really good start list, is doing an audit of our newscast through a different lens, right? Looking at it differently. So yeah, I would suggest that you guys just think about it. You can write it down if you want, or ask, what are the things we should stop doing? What are the things we should start doing? Figure out, because of what's changed, are there things that we're doing that just don't make sense anymore? Secondly, I would suggest for those of you, particularly who are on staff, that you start thinking about a new approach. And I say, be a newbie again. Be the new one in the newsroom. Come with a new approach to the newsroom, kind of like we did when we started in the newsroom, right? You come in and you're like, oh, this is going to be great. It's a brand new place. I'm learning about that. And maybe when we come into our places again, we might want to think about reintroducing ourselves to one another in a more personal way again, trying to get that newbie enthusiasm back about what we do. We can also talk about this when it comes to our community. Being new again means reintroducing ourselves to the communities that we cover, or communities that we haven't been in before. Concentrating on the things that we do best, going in a positive way. I would suggest that we want to try to set some new goals. Those goals can certainly and should be workplace goals, of course, but that's not the only ones. Maybe we want to set new goals for ourselves at home too. Maybe we want to be spending more time with our loved ones now that we're having to go back to the office. We want to build that time in. We want to build in time to go work out. I can't do it upstairs in my bedroom or in my garage anymore. Now I have to figure out when I can time it. I also want to do a special project in my newsroom once a month. I'm going to set that goal for myself. We want to make sure we're collaborating. One of the things that has happened in the cultures of our newsroom is that because we have been so separated, we were so separated for so long, that collaboration became really hard. Many newsrooms worked very hard to try to fix that. I don't know that very many of them cracked that nut, but now that you're back, collaboration is again possible. So you're building in opportunities for lots of conversation, whether that's in the news editorial meetings, whether that's in your producer meetings and breakdowns into specific shows, whether it is the conversations that reporters, if you have MMJs, the conversations that your MMJs are having with the newsroom throughout the day. Maybe you assign a buddy, somebody that they're constantly checking in with. But that we bring collaboration back into the newsroom because it's been really hard to do when people were gone. I'm going to suggest that you change the workplace a little bit. And I don't mean what we've just talked about on setting goals or collaboration. I'm talking about the physical structure of the place. That if you haven't completely gone back, maybe think about moving desks around, moving people around. Get that feel of a brand new start. Might take things off the wall and put new stuff on the wall, symbolically. Make the place friendly and fun in some ways, and certainly friendly, right? Make it feel different. to help people feel like they're not just walking into the same cave they were in when they left. Take advantage of the opportunity to clean the place up a little bit and change the dynamic by changing where people are. And lastly, let's challenge each other. Let's take on something big. Take on something big that we can do. Maybe it's a regular monthly in-depth piece that somebody gets assigned to. Maybe it's a collaborative newsroom project that happens. Maybe it's a volunteer project that you bring in for people in your newsroom or in your organization to go. We're going to go paint houses for Habitat for Humanity. We're going to go clean up a park. But take a challenge, make it challenging and to bring people together and to deliver, get people excited delivering something interesting to their viewers. Do any of you have anything you'd like to share about what your newsroom is doing in any of these areas? I want to open up that conversation if there is one to have. We have a lot going against us, but we have a lot working for us right now. When I mentioned a challenge, taking on a challenge, this is what I mean. We have a lot to cover. There's a lot going on, and our audience expects us to reflect it in the newscast. So think about how can we be relevant in these important categories, and I'm sure you can add others. But people are hurting right now. Inflation, employment, the economy is hard. It's scary. How can we challenge ourselves to cover those issues more closely and more clearly? Climate change, hot button issue right now. But the environment has changed dramatically in the last couple of years. And climate is coming in to do it too. The pandemic changed the environment. Environmental policies of the last 4 to 5 years have changed the environment. Climate change is going to do that too. This is the place we live. How can we cover that better? Criminal justice, instead of thinking and talking about covering crime, let's think about covering criminal justice, public safety, policing. The Black Lives Matter protests certainly put that front and center on our plate, didn't it? And there are ways for us to cover public safety in neighborhoods, in those communities where police may be less trusted than they were before, and where criminal justice may be unfairly dealt out. This is related to social justice, but racism and white supremacy, you guys know this, is rising significantly in our country. There were more hate crimes last year than the year before, than the year before, than the year before, starting with the Obama administration. Hate crime is on the rise, as is white supremacy in our community's face. There is no apology for advocating, our news advocating for social justice and social equality, because there is no legitimate other side to that. We should be attacking it, attacking inequality and attacking injustice in our communities in order to make them better. Immigration and refugees, the Ukraine story has really pointed out some of the issues around refugees and where they come from and why they come here. I think there's a direct relationship to immigration and the issues of immigration in the United States. Certainly democratic rights, voting rights, politics. Rather than covering politics, maybe we should be covering democracy and talking about how important and what makes up the democracy that we enjoy. Voting rights, safe elections, certainly, free speech, and a free press. If we don't advocate for ourselves and our own ability to tell stories freely, no one will do it for us. So let's tell that story about how important the work we do is. I know that you guys have other thoughts and other issues that probably are very local to you that are coming to mind to you right now. The first casualty of war is the truth, and we are the truth tellers. We are the fact gatherers. We are the ones who assign truth. And it can get lost in this war that we are in. You can use war as a metaphor for many, many things here. But we need to take that job of informing our community and giving them truth, being truth tellers. We need to take that job really seriously. And this is the kind of thing that helps us regain that purpose. Rather than coming in and just trying to get through every day safely, let's regain that purpose and relentlessly tell our communities what's happening and what they can do. So a few ideas that I have for you here to take back. The first is, I mentioned listening as part of culture. Well, we have to listen to the communities in order to be relevant to them, don't we? We have to listen because those communities that we cover, that we serve, those communities demand to be heard, and they should. Can we find a way of putting together some advisory council so that we hear from people? Can we get out into those communities just as a work day, perhaps, to learn about what the conversation is happening at the barber shop or at the grocery store? Can we do some ascertainment? We used to do that all the time. We used to, back in the 80s, we were required to do it by the federal government. We're not anymore, but ascertainment is just asking questions of people to say, how are we doing? Are we covering stories well for you? So we need to listen. We need to listen to the community we serve. We need to keep innovating, keep trying new things. Innovation, though, dies when we fear failing. We need to not fear failure. We need to think of failure as an opportunity to learn what didn't work. Fail forward, I like to say. Learn it. But if we don't try it, we will never do anything new. We must be innovators. And in high achieving newsrooms, remember when I mentioned this? High achieving newsrooms innovate creatively in order to keep finding ways. And if there's one thing we need as a newscast right now, it's innovation, right? In order to reach people and all these different platforms. I have this as number 3, but it probably should be number 1. We got to take care of ourselves. We've learned how important our own health and our own mental health is. We've certainly seen many of our colleagues struggle with some of those issues. I'm sure that we have all, as leaders in our newsrooms, perhaps reached out to some of those people in order to try to help them. We need to help each other, and we cannot forget to help ourselves. There's one thing we have learned from the pandemic, it's that support systems are important. Family, friends, just human communication is important to us. So let's not lose that. We should be seeking the truth. We can do it through fact checking. We can do it by calling out misinformation, and in some cases outright lies. And we can do it by telling the truth, by telling people the facts, by continuing to relentlessly tell people what is happening in a truthful way. And to be clear about that, sometimes the truth hurts, and that's okay. We should be seeking the truth constantly and telling our audience how we're getting at it. What do we know? How do we know it's true? And what else are we trying to find out for you? I believe in inclusivity in our journalism. I believe in inclusive journalism. I've spent 5 years working with newsrooms in order to keep pushing this practice of inclusive journalism, which is this: understanding what's happening in every community we serve and fairly and accurately portraying those communities in our newscasts every day. That we should be, Krista, as you mentioned, we should be auditing what we do, making sure we know who we're putting on TV and how we are portraying them. Looking for great positive stories in communities we often are not in. Making sure that we're holding the powerful accountable for how everyone is treated. and that everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, and everyone deserves justice for all, and that we should be thinking about how is every community we serve portrayed in our newscast. This includes meaning, and it means holding the powerful accountable. Who are the powerful? The powerful are corporations, government, law enforcement, holding them accountable, making sure that in some cases we are, in many cases, society has granted great power to people because we have found it in our best interest to do that. That police are the best example, law enforcement. We give law enforcement the power to take our freedom and even to take lives if it's in the best interest of society. Well, is there any obligation greater for a newsroom, for a journalist, for journalism in general? Is there any greater obligation than to hold police accountable for that power that society has given? And then, I use this word often, but we must relentlessly protect the democracy that allows us to do the work we do. Must relentlessly protect it. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, voting rights, being allowed to vote. We have to continue protecting the democracy, because when we lose that, we lose our jobs too. So it's a core element of what we do. I want to open up for questions now, give you an opportunity. We've got a little over 5 minutes left to talk. I don't know, I hope some of this has helped you rethink, reimagine some of what we do. In some ways, we're certainly not talking about doing anything radically different. The core of what we do as journalists is still there. And if we're talking about anything, it's recommitting to what it is that brought us into this business in the first place. And that is helping our communities get better, helping the people in our communities live better lives. So I'll stop talking. I am going to put up a quick slide here and just say, here is my information. I hope those of you who might want to have a deeper conversation about this or want some ideas or advice, I want to invite you to write and call. Be happy to be part of that, and feel free to do so. And with that, Krista, I'll open up to other questions, other conversations, other things you want to share. I'll stay here all day if you want to do that. I could talk about this stuff all day.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I did want to, 2 points I wanted to bring up listening to what you were telling us. One thing is I did know, so I was one of those people who, since the start of the pandemic, has worked virtually. And I just recently have started, I finally kind of got a new desk because things got moved around our newsroom. And it is kind of nice because I've moved 2 different places since the start of the pandemic, but to have like a new workspace and to kind of bring all my stuff back in here and kind of just kind of nest, I guess, professionally.
Yeah.
It's kind of refreshing. It is kind of a nice way to start anew, and it makes you feel good to kind of get back into it fresh. But
Good.
So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And I do think that the culture within the newsroom is really important. I know I mentioned in the chat a little bit ago, but over the Christmas time, one of our staff members, she actually took initiative and she asked other employees within the workspace if they would pitch in a little bit of money, and they could all get gifts for the unsung heroes of the newsroom. And I was fortunate to be one of the people that was mentioned and was, gifted with this. And when you're not in a newsroom and you're not connected, you're not seeing people in person and experiencing that, just the temperature and the culture of the newsroom, that was very, I don't know, it was very wonderful to be involved that way. So I definitely think that culture is really important in, retaining your employees and not losing people to burnout and making them feel a part of the team, especially if they're not within the newsroom.
Yeah. You know, it's fundamentally inhuman for us to be separated from one another. The human condition requires social interaction and touching and being able to see a body language, right? And that kind of communication. And so having someone do something just a little extra like that can mean a lot. Yeah. Thanks, Christian. Anybody else?
Appreciate you, Kevin. Always insightful. One of the things that I tried that I think has been way more helpful than I realized was just, it seems very basic, but sort of undercover boss, like going out in the field for a full day with a crew. And, you know, it's been years since I did that, you know, but like just to see the challenges that they face in today's time and going from being so separated to like fully engaged in their day is a dramatic change. But like being able to take them to lunch and talk about my kids and talk about how they're doing, carrying their tripod and shooting some video for them. And it also creates that connection again, but also shows them that you care. It gives them the actual physical help that they, you know, as an MMJ that they never get, you know, and also helps me understand what they're up against to better help them. And, you know, with a couple people, that's been a huge change in just understanding them better to be able to help them. We've tried everything, like, why, you know, we keep hitting this roadblock. What's the issue? And then finally seeing it, and it helps you understand them so much better, has been incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I was thinking, I'll bet you learned a ton going out with them about the challenges that they have out there every day that otherwise, you know, you think you know when you hear them, but seeing it and feeling it can change things a lot. Yeah, great idea. Excellent.
To add to what Matt was saying, I have noticed as a journalist, I've noticed a shift in how I talk to people and interview with people. And because working from home now, a lot of my phone calls come with screaming children in the background or dogs barking. And so there's like this new angle or this new perspective of each person you get now. In that I'll say like, oh, sorry, that's my kid screaming. And then the person you're talking to is like, oh, I get it. I got a kid too. You get like the whole person now. It's like we've given each other so much grace and we're willing to share that more personal side of our lives now that we've had this pandemic. That I think that has been one of the good things that has come out of this.
Yeah, for sure. And that's probably, I wonder if that's something that will stick, right? Even when we go now and may do interviews in person, that there is some connection that we all have with the shit we just lived through, right? That there's something personal about that now that allows it, that gives us, I think, did you use the word grace? That idea of grace and care that otherwise, you know, we always went in with, you know, we're the news. And it's not that much, it's not that anymore, as much that anymore. Anyway, great point. Thank you. Anybody else?
Kevin, this is Carlota. And
Hi, Carlota.
my experience coming from PBS goes back to where you differentiate between the reporting and the storytelling. At PBS, we, of course, always did sort of the long form in programming as opposed to news and having a news room per se. But on a weekly basis, we kicked out stories that were germane and important to the community. Now, in the position that I'm in on the advisory for the Detroit School of the Arts, and also on the advisory with a STEM school, which is the Benjamin O. Davis Aerospace School, we find that the students we're launching into the newsrooms and going to colleges are really irritated by this reimagined new world that we're coming back into. We want them to go on field trips to see the newsroom, but we go to the newsrooms and take them there, and they really don't see the hustle and bustle that was once there. They themselves have been out shooting stories on, small cameras and iPhones and trying to edit and piece them together. And we've had all these virtual classes. So it comes down to, we just are all totally uncomfortable. And one of the biggest messages that the instructors and teachers who have worked in newsrooms, who are teaching, and imparting to the students is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. During this pandemic, I myself come from a very diverse family, and I was like the trifecta of African American, Hispanic surnamed female at the PBS station. I was connected to the community, but in the pandemic, I took the time to get my certification in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the biggest points that was driven home was about the fact that now with journalism, with media, we have Wikipedia, and we have all of these people chiming in to what is not necessarily the full truth, but it's what is known. And so you have these young students, and you've had a departure of the old veterans, the old folks like myself from the newsrooms, who are now displaced by younger people who don't know the history. And so in making a reimagination, what would be your strongest point that we should drive home to these young students in high school and college? Because they're ready to be launched. They're looking for leadership. Having a session to talk about being comfortable with yourself and starting with yourself, taking care of yourself mentally and physically, and then going out and engaging is one of the things that we're struggling to impart to them because they don't feel it. They see the veterans leaving the workplace. They see the newsrooms dismantling, and they've decided that they want journalism, and the truth is out there. And there's so many issues that they really have to deal with, and so many stories that they can tell. Our story has been at Detroit City Airport, keeping the Detroit City Airport open, moving the Benjamin O. Davis students back to the airport, because this was a significant historical story. And so therefore, it has been both fodder coming from the trenches, as well as feeding it up to the news entities and the Tuskegee Airmen and the Friends of Detroit. And it's just swirling all around everyone, and everyone feels uneasy. So what would be your words of comfort there?
Well, I don't know that I would describe it as comfort. That would be the first thing. I would be much more an advocate of describing the work as it is realistically. And that is number one and first, it's hard. The work that we do is hard. And I don't know that we have clearly told people that it may be hard, but it is worth it. That the communities that we serve as journalists need us, need each one of us very badly, and that we have tremendous power to create change, which is why inclusion and diversity is so important. Understanding bias, understanding the value of multiple perspectives, not just inside of our newsrooms, but the communities that we talk to. That I love what you said about being uncomfortable. There are two parts when I look at it to being uncomfortable. The first is recognizing what makes you uncomfortable and why. And that means understanding who you are and the biases that you carry from the way that you grew up, or the beliefs that you have, or just what you look like. So understanding that in order to go out and learn. Being uncomfortable, as my journalistic definition is, being uncomfortable means you're learning. You're educating yourself about something you don't know about. You're going to a place that you haven't been before, and you're learning about people who are different from you, and then using that discomfort, using that learning to educate the community that you serve. And so one thing that I would want to tell young people, that I do tell young people when I speak with them about journalism, is that there is no more powerful organization you can join or career you can join that can make a bigger difference faster. And secondly, if you are constantly on a mission of discovery, if you love learning, there is no better place to do it than as a journalist, in making yourself uncomfortable in order to learn and educate the audience that you serve. So those would be the things that I would continue to drive home. And I will tell you, I don't think it's just for young students of journalism. I think even the veterans among us benefit from going back and thinking about how important the work is that we do and the differences that we can make in our communities. Thank you, Carlotta. Anyone else? Well, it's 11:05, and I appreciate all of you being here. I thank NATAS in Michigan. Krista, thank you for getting back in touch with me and allowing me to be part of this again. I am hopeful that you will see me again in a few months to deliver some other conversation with you. And so I thank you, all of you. Now, I know almost all of you are going back out to do your jobs. And for those of you who are journalists, I wish you good news today. Please be safe, serve your communities. Your job is important. Thank you.
Kevin.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks,
Great
Krista.
presentation, Kevin.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
so much. You gave some valuable information.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Glad
And
you
then
found it helpful.
Then to anybody who is listening, who's not a NATAS board member, we will be holding 5 more webinars throughout the year. So please stay tuned. Keep an eye on your email box for those. And thank you for watching.
Thank you, Krista.
Great job, Krista. Well done.
Thanks.
Krista, that went great.